Okay, so now that we've seen how functions can be used to modularize our application, we want to take the next step with functions. And one of the things that we're going to do with functions is functions need to have access to data. And I'm going to show you a couple of things that are going to cause problems with that, and then the solution to that, which is how do we deal with function parameters. Okay, so you'll notice that I have a JavaScript file named function params, so I'm going to go ahead and create that file. So I'm going to have a new file called function params. And function params, the starting point is going to be the controller, so I'm going to have a function named the controller. This is going to be our starting point of our application. And the idea here is that we should still be able to use something like document.write. It works. Okay, and then we can see in the browser, we should be able to see this HTML file. Okay, so our code is working, we have our function, and that's great. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I would like to have a welcome message. So I'm going to assume that I have a variable called welcome message. And right now it's going to be it works. And I'm going to use that welcome message right here in the document.write. Okay, and that shouldn't change much. I just have a variable that's saying, here's the welcome message. You'll notice that I've saved it. Nothing really changes there. But I want to modularize this so that I'm going to print a welcome message. And instead of using document.write, it might be an h1 tag, it might be some kind of styling. So I don't know what it's going to be. And for our case, we're just going to write out the message. It's not a big deal. But the idea being, I'm going to modularize it. I'm going to put it into a function so that someone else could come along and say, look, you know, the welcome message has to be spruced up a little bit. A graphic designer could get a hold of it and work on it. And so it's modularized. So I'm going to have a function definition that is going to output a welcome message to the user. This is our function. Okay, so we're going to have a function called output welcome message. And the idea is that we would then use the code that we have before. Okay, so we have our variable called welcome message, and we say it works, and then we want to output that welcome message. So we're going to then call our function, output welcome message. And you're going to see that this doesn't work. So you'll notice it's crashing. And if I go to the developer tools and I look at my console, you'll see an error saying welcome message is not defined. So if I go back over to my code, the welcome message is defined, but it's only accessible inside of this first function, the controller function. So it's here, it exists, it has a value, it has a variable name, all of those things. But that variable is only accessible within the function that it's defined. So when I come up to this other function and I try to access that variable that was defined down below, I don't have access to it. As far as this function is concerned, output welcome message, the variable welcome message does not exist. Okay, so that doesn't exist. I could fix it by taking this welcome message and moving it up into the other function. So that would be one fix. Okay, so this would fix it, and if I go over to a browser, I can verify that that is the case. So you'll notice that it fixed it. There's no problem there anymore. However, what happens if I want to have multiple messages? Okay, so my function will take any kind of message. So welcome message 1 is it works. And then maybe I want to break after this as well. Okay, so that's the first one. And then I'm going to have welcome message 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, so I want multiple welcome messages. It works. It worked again. still working, and done. Okay, so those are my 4 messages that I want, and I want to pass in welcome message 1. And then I want to invoke this with welcome message 2 and welcome message 3 and welcome message 4. So I want all of those welcome messages. I want to print them all out. This function should do that. Okay, so the way this is going to work is you'll notice that I put in this welcome message here. So instead of just saying beginning and ending parentheses, I'm putting in welcome message 1. And the idea there is that I'm taking the value of that variable, it works, and I'm going to send it up to this function. So I'm sending the value, it works, to my function called output welcome message. And then I need a way to refer to that value. So I can't refer to it as welcome message 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. What I have to do is I have to decide, how do I want to refer to this text that gets sent into my function? And I get to decide for the function how we get to reference it. So I'm just going to call it message in my function definition. So I'm going to output a welcome message as long as you tell me what the message is. And then I'll use that message that you told me about, and I'll output it. Okay, so the idea is that on line 16, I evaluate this expression, welcome message 1. It evaluates to it works with 4 exclamation points. That value, it works with 4 exclamation points, gets sent up to our variable called message. So this is a new variable that now has the value that was sent in. It has the value, it works, with 4 exclamation points. We write it out. Okay, and that's how our application is going to work this time. So if I go ahead and save this, and I go look, you'll notice that I get my output saying it works. Okay, so now let's try this again, but this time we're going to use welcome message 2. Okay, so the first time we take the value it works, we send it up to our function, message is equal to it works with 4 exclamation points. That's what we print out. We return control. Then we hit line 17, we say we want to call that function again, but this time we want to call this function passing in it worked again. So what we do is we take this value, we send it into our function, so message, the variable message is now it worked again, and that's what we're going to write out. Okay, so now we can go back over to our browser. We'll notice that I get that it worked again. Okay, so that's good. And then we can call our function again, this time using output message or welcome message 3. So that we just output that it worked again. Now we evaluate welcome message 3, which should be still working with an exclamation point. We take still working with an exclamation point, we send it into our function, so message is equal to still working. It gets output along with a break. So we should see that third message. Okay, so it's still working. And then lastly, we're going to do this with our fourth message, saying we're done. So welcome message 4 gets evaluated to done. The value done gets sent into our function. So message is equal to done. We print out done and a break. Okay. So that's how our function's working. We're passing information into our function. We're passing these 4 separate values into the function. If I wanted to, I can have multiple things get passed into a function. So I could have a message and an indicator whether the break should show up or not. Okay, so let's say I want a break to show up sometimes and not others. Okay, so I'm going to have another parameter should break. Okay, and then this part is going to be conditional, whether I should break or not. So now I'm going to change the code. If should break equals true, then go ahead and output a break. So for the first one, we're going to say that yes, we should break. For the second one, we're going to say no, we shouldn't break. The third one will break, and then the fourth one will, it really doesn't matter, so because it's the last one. So now I'm passing in a message for the message and a true or false value indicating whether I should break or not, whether I should output this break tag. And now you'll notice that it has an impact on how this looks. So after the first one, I said we should break. That was true. After the second one, I said we shouldn't break. So you'll notice that there's no break in between the second and third message. And then the fourth one, I argued that it didn't matter because there's nothing behind it, so we won't see any of the output, so it really doesn't make a difference. We could say that I want to break after all of them. Or we could say that I want to break after none of them. Okay, so now it's just going to be one continuous line. Okay, so it's really up to us how we want to handle those parameters. The reason I put this should break here is not because I necessarily think that that functionality is useful. I put it in so that you could see how I would indicate that I have multiple values that this function needs. So the function needs a message, and it needs to know if I should break after outputting the message. So that's what I'm going to tell you when I actually invoke the function. What is the message, and should I break or not? Okay, in this case, we're saying that we shouldn't break on any of the messages. Okay, and that's what our function is executing. Okay, so this is part 2 of our functions that we're going to look at. So how do I deal with functions that have incoming parameters, incoming values, and how do I use those incoming values? Part 3 is going to talk about what happens when a function returns a value. So that's kind of the next step of functions, is a function that returns a value.